Today, I'm excited to have Colin C Campbell with me. He's a serial entrepreneur. He has created, scaled, and exited a half a dozen tech companies. He's originally from Canada, where I'm from and where I still live. But now I guess he has gone to warmer pastures. He lives in Florida. He's also wrote an amazing book that's beating all the charts about starting, scaling, and exiting. So, Colin, welcome to the Tech Business Roundtable podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you? I know we can spend probably two podcasts just talking about your career and your 30-year journey as a tech entrepreneur, but give me like the Reader's Digest version.
Absolutely. Okay. Grew up actually near you. Grew up in the east side of Toronto, a farming background. Graduated University of Toronto, and right out of that, after that graduation, we started our first company. It was an internet access company called Internet Direct. So some of your Toronto listeners may remember this story, but we actually set up a dial-up internet provider and became the largest independent ISP in Canada. We took that public in the 90s and then sold it to a company in 99.
That's brilliant. So you started riding the tech wave from the very first wave. What was a recent exit before you started helping other founders and CEOs?
Yeah, I like the way you put that. I started riding the tech wave. That's actually something that came out of my research and after identifying patterns. See, I was asked to speak at MIT for entrepreneurs master's program run by Vern Harnish. And in that session, I had to reflect on what was it that I was doing over and over again to succeed. And I began to identify patterns. One of those patterns was we caught a wave, a tech wave or regulatory change. And we were able to ride those waves and capitalize on them. You'll appreciate this, I think, is that one of the individuals we interviewed for the book was a gentleman named Jeffrey Moore, who wrote Crossing the Chasm.
Oh, that was the first tech book I ever read, and I memorized that book. I probably
Oh,
read it like 5 times.
well, then I think you really will get a kick out of this book because we have a chapter in the book called Catching the Wave. And I interview Jeffrey Moore in the book about that. And we talk also about AI and other paradigm shifts that are occurring. But there are a number of things you can do to really capitalize on the wave. I talk about making technology easy. Believe it or not, Naren, that too many entrepreneurs, too many companies make technology too complicated. The
Right.
easier you make it, the better chance you have of succeeding. The second thing to do in a tech wave is really deliver the fastest. Whoever delivers the fastest wins. You might appreciate this, but back in the day when after CompuServe had launched, there was a company called AOL. Now, AOL distributed diskettes everywhere. They had those CD-ROMs, so much so that we in our office, we used them as coasters. I mean, you could see them everywhere. And whoever delivers the fastest wins in that market. In that particular market, AOL trounced CompuServe. Obviously, there was another paradigm shift called broadband, and that knocked out those companies as well. So you had this internet access wave, and then in 2000, my partners and I started a company called Hostopia. Now, these are Toronto-based companies. We had a company called Two Cows. I don't know if you remember Two Cows.
Oh yeah, they're still
Yeah,
around.
they're still
Yeah,
around. They're almost $500 million
yeah.
before the tech wreck. I think they're about 250, $300 million valuation. They're still around. And the gentleman that I hired, Elliot Noss, he's still there as CEO running that company. So we did Two Cows, and we were really trying to take advantage of the change in software, because back in the 90s, you'd actually have to get software on a diskette or a CD-ROM, and then you would put it into your computer and you'd load it up. Two Cows allowed you to download the software. Nowadays, we're obviously in cloud computing, and that's what we launched in 2000, a company called Hostopia, and it became the largest provider of email and web hosting services globally to telecoms. We won every 9 out of the top 10 telecoms in Canada. And then we began to win contracts in the United States, one after another. And eventually we got AT&T, Vodafone, British Telecom. We won them all. And I attribute that to the X factor, which we can get to later. But the fact is, we had this cloud computing, the rise of cloud computing. Then in 2010, we saw the rise of e-commerce companies. I call it the rise of the micro brands. So we went into a number of e-commerce companies. In 2012, there was a regulatory change at ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, where they opened up to new domain extensions. And we applied for .club. See, I was one of the founders of .ca up in Canada. So I happened to like the right of the dot. And we applied for .club, which is an alternative to .net and .org. And then we grew that to 1 million domain names. And your question was, what was a recent success? We sold that company to GoDaddy about 2 years ago. And now we run an incubator of about 10 companies here in South Florida.
That's awesome. I want to finish this conversation with your book, because I think that'll be the icing on the cake, because the book is going to be summarizing a lot of the things you're going to be talking about. I know the book is doing really, really well, and you're crushing it. And I know you're doing a tour all around the world, and hopefully I'll see you in Toronto not too long from now. So let's focus on this magic formula you figured out, which is starting, scaling, and exiting. But given our audiences all have started businesses, actually run successful businesses, maybe zoom in on scaling and exiting. And something you said prior to our conversation that I kind of stuck with me is this idea that you have to change. The people change, lots of things changes when you go from these phases, right? Starting phase, scaling phase, and exiting phase. So let's jump into scaling. So what is the first thing you want to tell our listeners about scaling companies?
All right. So the book is broken in 4 sections: start, scale, exit, repeat. And we talk about, you need a great story, you need great people, you need good systems, and you need to raise enough money for your startup. In fact, 82% of companies fail because they don't raise enough money. All the other 3 components are in place.
Let me repeat that. So you need a great story, you need great people, you need enough money,
and
what's
you
the
need
fourth?
systems.
And you need systems. Got
Systems.
it.
Yeah.
Do you need
Yeah.
systems when you're starting, or do you need systems when you're scaling?
I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of it really is based on the entrepreneur in the early days,
Okay.
but that has to change. Okay, let me be clear. The vast majority of companies in Canada, the United States, and globally fail to scale. All right? Because the story, people, money, and systems need to change dramatically during the scale phase. And then we're going to change them again for exit, and then even repeat. Okay, so the story changes. Now, you talked about people. The number one thing, in my opinion, I don't have a study of this one. I've just seen too many founders fail to scale. The number one thing holding founders back is themselves. It's checking their ego at the door. It's learning to delegate responsibilities, not tasks. Because when you want to scale, you can't do everything. And even emotionally, it's very difficult. If you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and by the way, my wife runs a school. She has 16 employees. And I tell her, delegate responsibilities, not tasks. When you don't delegate responsibilities, when you're responsible for every aspect of your business, you're thinking of that 24/7. We're going to want to find leaders, hire great leaders. And we talk exactly how to do that in the book. And they're going to want to take responsibility for different areas of the company. And we're going to also identify our strengths and our weaknesses. What are we good at? Are we an entrepreneur who is great at sales but needs an operator? Are we good at operations or need to hire a salesperson? Now, I'll tell you one thing. The entrepreneurs that are sales oriented tend to have the most difficult struggle scaling, because sales is always coming back to them. They need to learn how to hire great salespeople and scale the organization like that, or even better, hire a sales manager, and then they run the salespeople and scale it, and they simply step in when they need to. So people you talk to on scale, that's the number one thing, is the entrepreneur needs to get out of their own way. Once that happens, once that transformation takes place, then you need to think about your story. And I'd love to talk to you about this X factor. The second time I brought it up, and I'd love to go into that if we're ready to go there now.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we do that, I do have some follow-up questions listening to you. So let's take, so it's people, enough money, scale, systems, and story, right? Let's take people. So give me like a 10,000 foot view on how you think about people in a startup phase, starting phase versus scaling phase versus exit phase. Just give me the 10,000 foot summary.
Right. So in the book, we talk a lot about profiling. I'm a very
Mm-hmm.
big believer in profiling. And that does take place even at the startup phase. If you're looking for someone to complement your skills that you need to partner with, don't just partner with your buddy from college. You want to partner with somebody who's got a different skill set and also a different personality profile. When you get into scaling, though, this becomes religion. Okay. You need to identify the positions you have in your company. And I want you to think about uh, your company as 10 times its size. We call it thinking in zeros, the chapter. And it's
Mm-hmm.
all about adding zeros. And if you were to increase your company 10x, what would the people look like? So we're going to want to hire people who have runway, who've done it before. So
Mm-hmm.
if your business is $1 million, we're going to want to hire people who have built businesses up to $10 million. They've already built it. We don't want to go too high. I've seen it where people who work for billion-dollar companies come into these early stage startups that are scaling and destroy them. Okay.
Right.
We really want the skill set to be someone who's been there before, who's launched a business or who has worked in a startup that's grown to 10 million. If we're going from 1 million to 10 million. And we're going to want to do personality profiles testing. They're very cheap, almost free for the most part. And you can do this, identify the position, identify the profile, and obviously identify the skills needed for that as well. And then assemble our team. Okay.
Go ahead.
Issue here is to really learn to delegate, though. It's not you're not going to scale if you have all this of these great talent around you and you don't let go. So delegate responsibilities, not tasks.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. Let me ask you this: what's the personality test you would recommend or you use?
So the one I use and I describe in the book is called DISC,
Right.
DISC. Okay. And again, most entrepreneurs are DIs. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
DC. I don't like selling. I hate it. I hate rejection. I hate selling. I'll be honest with you. So I've always hired salespeople around me. And don't get me wrong, I can do it, right? But it takes a different personality profile to do that. Uh, so if you are a DI, just be careful that you're not getting in the way because the business relies solely on your sales ability. If you're a
Right.
DC, we need to find a DI to either manage a sales team or to partner with for your business because that is absolutely critical. When we were at Hostopia, just after we went public, we realized that we were running our organization too much like a tech company. We were basically a tech software as a service platform company. We had to transform into a sales organization. And that meant implementing a lot of sales systems as well.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So we talked about people. I'm taking the easy ones out first. Money, of course, we all understand what that means. Any takeaways on money?
So when we're talking about scaling with money, we want to scale with the right type of funding at the right time.
Mm,
Okay. And that means sometimes you might not even need the money, but if things are good in the market, that's a time to go to market. This is not a good time currently with high interest rates and an IPO market that's pretty much been shut down. Okay. So we are going to want to try to time it and we're going to want to get the right type of funding. The best kind of funding, and we interviewed a gentleman who wrote the book Customer Funded Startup, uh, John Mullins. The best type of funding is by using resources within your own organization to fund. So, for instance, let me give you an example. There's many ways you can reduce costs. We're always talking about that in the book about these are the different techniques you can do to reduce costs. But you can also get customers to pay you for your services in advance. I'm working with a company right now, another Toronto-based company. Company was struggling for cash. We just closed, or he just closed a $450,000 3-year contract paid up front. Another company I have here in South Florida called paw.com, we just closed an $850,000 contract paid up front. Literally, when you get the money, we've got the money for 4 or 5 months before the inventory even gets here, before it's even used. And so there are some techniques. If you're running a recurring revenue business, a SaaS company, for instance, annual payments, we're going to want to encourage, because cash is king. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe in investors, and I actually prefer, in the United States, there's something called a Reg D filing where you can get sophisticated investors in your business. When we had to raise $7 million for .club, because we had to win the name in an auction, we raised $7 million, and we put together a private placement memorandum. And that private placement memorandum, we filed with the SEC. We did a Reg D filing. I sent it to 36 of my LinkedIn contacts, and we closed 27 of them. So that, and by the way, why did I like this particular type of financing so much? I liked it because it had no liquidation preference. So we're going to talk about venture capital. Everybody talks about venture capital. But I don't know if you heard the news today about WeWork. WeWork is close to bankruptcy. And they're going to be filing for bankruptcy. And this is a company that's worth $47 billion at one time.
That's crazy.
And they caught, the founder and the founders of that business caught what I call Silicon Valley disease. Too much money was thrown at them. Oh, I know. Look, Silicon Valley is by far, the VCs there have fueled more startups and more companies than any other group of investors on the planet. Okay.
Agreed.
Especially tech companies.
Yes.
But there are the negatives, and we never talk about the negatives. We never look at the carnage on the Silicon Valley highway. We focus on just the successes. Well, WeWork, $47 billion, and they got so much money thrown at them that money corrupted them. And now there's a reason why a lot of VCs want to push acceleration of growth and be less conservative, because they have something called liquidation preference, which means they get paid before the entrepreneur makes 1 cent on a sale. Okay. And that changes the risk profile. Now, in this particular case, the VCs are going down with the ship. Okay. But that's not the case all the time. There are a number of situations, and I'm working with one company right now where they raised $60 million in VC funding. The entrepreneur worked for 13, 14 years of his life. He's been pushed out of the company, and his likelihood of making anything on a sale transaction is nowhere near the next decade. And in fact, it'll be closed out, and even the VCs will lose half their money. But guess what? The VCs lost half their money. The entrepreneur lost all his money and 15 years of his life. So I would be very careful with liquidation preference. You know, the over 90% of Inc. 5,000 companies do not take VC funding. Okay. So there's an obsession with VC funding, and I'm not suggesting you shouldn't consider it. We've done VC funding. We did it with TELUS Ventures for Hostopia, but it was strategic. They actually really did help us build the company. And so, you know, there are a lot of opportunities to do it. You should consider it if it makes sense. And in particular, if you're in a technology where there's a tornado, okay, where you need to move very, very quickly, like Clubhouse, for instance, they had to get venture capital because they're up against Twitter Spaces and Spotify and LinkedIn Audio and all those other ones. They needed a lot of money fast.
By the way, is Clubhouse dead? Like, I know it was pretty popular for like a few months, and then I never heard of it afterwards.
Yeah, no, it's not dead. It's still there. Hopefully.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? I hope we're not having a conversation about the way they caught Silicon Valley disease a year from now. Let's hope they can pull it out. But we actually have over 1 million members on Clubhouse, on a club called Startup Club.
Okay.
And we do a weekly show. I do one every Friday, 2:00 Eastern. It's a live show that we syndicate through our podcast network.
That's awesome. Just one last point on people before we jump into my favorite, of course, is the story. I come from marketing. I love stories. Um, so on the people side, what would change when you are getting ready to exit?
So what changes is, you remember I told you about the entrepreneur's got to check their ego at the door?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to multiply that. Okay.
Mm,
Uh, One, we want to reduce, if you can, reduce the role of yourself within the organization that can increase the chances of a transaction occurring and give you a higher valuation. I had the opportunity to work for companies that we sold to. Unfortunately, I worked for a Fortune 500 company for 3 years, and we
mhm,
bought dozens of companies, and I was in charge of the acquisitions. So I've seen it from both sides here. Uh, the entrepreneurs are kooky. Entrepreneurs, there is not, I think of every acquisition I've done in my career, we've got about 20 companies. Not one time did the entrepreneur stay beyond 1 or 2 years. Okay.
mm,
They don't fold into the organization well. There's a lot of conflict. They don't like the culture of large companies. Uh, don't treat entrepreneurs very well. I'll be quite frank. I hated it for 3 years. I made a commitment when I sold the company that I'd stick around for 3 years, and I ran the company for 3 years, and I hated it. It was just, you know. So the more we can remove ourselves, the better. Now, there's an exception to that. If you really don't have another company set up, and this was what we talk about in Repeat, then you might want to stick around just so you can see opportunities. Opportunities are very hard to find when you're sitting in your basement watching Netflix 7 hours a day. Okay. We want to be in the industry. We want to see the opportunities. And preferably, we even want to launch our next company before we sell this company. Okay. But
mhm.
we don't want to ever deviate from the core. We want to take care of our core business.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you for that. Let's jump into the story. What do you mean by story? And and also give me some examples of who gets it right and what does it look like? And does it even change as you go through these three phases?
It absolutely changes. Okay. And we go through this in detail in the book. And I know we have limited time. So, but when you first start a business, it's about solving a problem. You need to have a purpose or a why. You need to love that idea because it's a roller coaster and you're going to have those hard times. And if the only way you'll stick through it is if you love your idea. Getting into scale. Here's the number one thing that businesses can do to scale is figure out their X factor. Okay. Think Domino's Pizza, 30 minutes or free. In Toronto, you're too young to remember this, but Pizza
Yeah.
became the dominant company. They did 30 minutes or free. And at the time, my family owned a pizza restaurant east of Toronto. And we said, oh, it's impossible. They're going to go bankrupt. But you know what? They became the largest pizza company in Toronto. Domino's became the largest pizza company in the United States. Think national car rental. You just show up and get in your car. They solved a bottleneck, a true bottleneck, which was the time it takes to check out a vehicle and you're a business traveler. So you want to be able to land at the airport, go right to the car and leave. And by the way, they're number one. The company's number one car rental company. And remember Hertz? I mean, they took them down. There's a company in I think it's Austin, Texas, called Cookie Delivery. You know, they were a bakery that would deliver cookies like every other bakery. But they figured, you know what? What if we actually built a truck where we can cook the cookies on the way to the customer so when they open them up, they're steaming hot? They even got the domain name cookiedelivery.com as well. So this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about finding a bottleneck in your industry, something you have that no one else has. Back in 2006, we were told a day before that we were going to lose the Earthlink contract. Okay. The CTO and I flew to Atlanta. We took the mid-level executive out to lunch, or he took us out to lunch. And actually, it was funny because he only had a two-seater Wego. It was an electric car. So I climbed into the trunk, and I'm lying in the trunk, all curled up. I told you we're a sales-driven organization, and we'll do whatever it takes to get the deal. And then we drove to the restaurant. We got to the restaurant, and he told us that, look, he doesn't want to lose his job. Okay. And we said, well, we have a solution for you. We're going to give you a 100% migration guarantee. Now, we said, we'll pay you $350 at the time. That was the fair market value for every website we lose. And they had 80,000 websites and maybe 1 million email addresses. I can't remember exactly the number. This won us the contract. And let me tell you this, it wasn't easy. We had to re-engineer our entire organization. We had 200 people in Ukraine who were checking every single website. We wrote the best heuristics software in the industry to migrate websites. See, the number one thing we found out from our buyer is they just didn't want to get fired, because when migrations occur in big companies, people get fired, things go wrong. So we became the best in the world at it. And then we came up with a nearly unbearable brand promise, which is a 100% migration guarantee. Guess what? Once we did that, we won that Earthlink contract. We won AT&T. We won Vodafone. We won British Telecom. We won every single telecom in the marketplace. It was like clearing a deck. We wiped out our competitors. And we were up against Verio at the time, which was a $5 billion company. And it was bought by NTT. It was unbelievable. When you come up with that, now it took us 7 years to come up with that X factor, but when you come up with it, the impact in your business can be huge.
Yeah, I would love to brainstorm about what my X factor should be. Anyways, yeah, I mean,
you got to read you got to buy the book.
I'll read the book.
You got to buy the book. Yeah, you got to buy the book.
It looks like it's definitely going to be a treasure. So, I mean, it's just talking to you. I mean, this is not just some pundit who just, read a book. I mean, wrote a book. This is somebody who has been through the experience and who has the lessons to back up what he says and why he says it. So that's awesome. That's what entrepreneurs love, right? So thank you for what you're doing.
Do we have time for a good lesson on exit?
Oh, let's focus on exits, because, a lot of people are thinking about exit. So yeah, I would love that. Let's jump in.
It's back to Toronto. It's a Toronto story. We were running a publicly traded ISP, the one I mentioned to you, that we spent 10 years building, about 200 employees. We decided to merge it with a cable company. We then applied for a license from the federal government, which we won for free. We won half the license for all fixed internet in Canada. The stock went to over $1 billion. Now I'm 28 years old, own 13% of the company. The stock goes to over $1 billion. Now, when we did the merger, we agreed to an 18-month lockup. Okay? Nothing could go wrong. This internet was crazy. Everybody loves it. Do you remember what happened on March of 2000?
Oh, I know what happened. I mean, the whole thing crashed, right? The dot-com crash.
The dot-com crash. Well, bad things can happen. And we were locked up. That stock that traded at $19 a share, I ended up selling at 6 cents a share. The company had pulled its offering, went insolvent, and filed for bankruptcy protection 12 months later. That's how fast. By the way, that same company, the one that we ran, that ISP, we were #1 fastest growing company in Canada on the front page of Profit Magazine. We went from #1 to last place finish. And I didn't just lose all the money. A lot of people around me did. So 2 lessons we learned from that. One is bad things can happen. Do you think bad things can happen? Look at last year. We had the tech wreck. We had the crypto crash. We had a war. We had a hurricane. Bad things can happen to your business. So getting out of your business could make a lot of sense. The second thing I learned is liquidity or control. And I believe by that mantra. I am not going to do a deal ever again unless I'm in control of the company. So liquidity or control. And I know there might be some exceptions where you can see some roll-ups and whatnot, but I would never go down that path. Never again. Now, let me give you some reasons why exit might be better than start, scale, keep. One of them is tax. Please check with your accountant on this. But the fact is, capital gains in countries, most countries around the world, is taxed at a much lower rate. At Hostopia, we were paying 40% federal and 15% dividend tax. So about 55% of the profits of the company was being taxed. Okay. We sold that company. And by the way, this time we sold it for all cash. It was publicly traded as well. We did an IPO in 2006. We sold it in 2008 for 17 times EBITDA. And we paid 15% tax. That would have taken 30 years to make that kind of money had we paid the 55% tax on it. So you can see that tax does play a little bit of a role in the argument that you should start, scale, exit, but that's not the main argument. The main argument is bad things can happen. Technology can shift, technology can change. With AI, we're going to see a dramatic change in the world. Some are going to lose, some are going to win.
Some are going to win very big, right? That's definitely
very big.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've invested in here at the incubator. It's called Pensilla. We've been working on it for over a year. It's just coming out now, and it is it basically wipes out. I know you're in marketing, I know, but it basically wipes out the marketing executives essentially, right? It's your AI marketing team, and it's phenomenal what it does. Now it's designed for e-commerce companies, and it's just unbelievable what it can do. I'm absolutely amazed. When we did the book, we submitted the book last November. We talk a lot about AI in the book, ChatGPT and whatnot, and we made some predictions. One, we believe that it is the most historic change in our lifetime, and it will be how dial-up, how connecting to the internet in the 90s, broadband in the 2000s, social media and e-commerce in 2010s. This will be the decade of AI. We think it's going to be transformative, a paradigm shift. There will be more millionaires minted because of AI than any other technology shift over the last 3 or 4 decades. This is it.
Right.
This is the big one. I'm so excited to be part of this now. And I don't mean your business has to be an AI company. I'm also suggesting that you want to use AI to accelerate your startup. Let me just make a confession here. On the book, we never used AI one bit. But come February, Forbes asked me to write the inside cover for the book. I literally took the introduction of the book, fed it into ChatGPT. It came back with and I said, please write the inside cover of a best-selling book. And it didn't know it was going to be best-selling, but turned out to be best-selling. But please write an inside cover. It wrote the inside cover. I submitted it. They even used that for the Amazon listing. And about 3 months ago, I said, well, guys, why haven't you changed anything? You're the experts. And they said, no, it's perfect. So you can use AI to help you with your marketing. Even at Startup Club, we had a marketing executive on, and we did a challenge. Okay, we said, come up with a tagline for Startup Club. And she came out with a long sort of the community of people that come together. Da, 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 da. And then I said to ChatGPT, give me 5 taglines for Startup Club. And one of them popped out was fuel your startup journey. And that's it. Like, I think ChatGPT did a better job. Look, I even did a live interview on Clubhouse last Friday. And you know who interviewed me? ChatGPT. It's hilarious. She gave 13 questions. I told her in advance, do a 30-minute interview, 2-minute summation. Look, we're using AI for customer service. And what I like about that, we're not only just using it because we have a lot of offshore labor in the Philippines. We're not only using it to improve language skills. We're saying make the responses positive. So we're institutionalizing positivity in the responses for customers. Okay. I've written 2 contracts with AI. Again, to get legal advice, please. I'm not giving legal advice here, but I've written 2 employee contracts. These aren't critical contracts. And I'm like, they're just really a meeting of minds. But you know what? If I went to a law firm and paid $1,000 to write those contracts, or can I spend 60 seconds, not even 30 seconds, typing out a prompt on ChatGPT? Find ways to utilize AI. Just think about it. Think, how can AI change or help you accelerate growth or reduce costs for your business.
Thank you so much. Before we sum up, I just wanted to ask about your book. What is it called? Where can I get it? Do you have
So
an audio version? Just give us fill in the blanks.
yeah, so it's everywhere on every channel. Audible will come out this week or next week.
What is the name again? Just so that our listeners can
Sorry,
write
the
it
name
down.
of the book is Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat. Serial Entrepreneur Secrets Revealed. Okay, but just remember, start, scale, exit, repeat. If you type that in anywhere on Google, you'll have a ton of listings that will link you to Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I know Indigo chapters in Canada. And you can also get the audiobook for Apple's already out, and the Audible is coming out. It's we submitted it over 6 weeks ago, and they say it's between 6 and 8 weeks, and we're at week almost 7 now. So it'll be out probably by the time this show airs. So just go to Audible and search for Start, Scale, Exit, Repeat.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. Do you have you said when is the Audible coming out? I'm going to get the Audible one. I'm just literally looking at it right now.
It's already available on audiobooks.
Okay.
The Audible will be out next week.
Oh, perfect. So I should be able to buy it today, or you think it'll be on?
No, they don't do pre-sales on Audible.
Right.
Yeah, but you know, we really tried to make reading a physical book fun again. It's also designed for ADHD entrepreneurs. There's 58 chapters, 200 callouts, dozens of illustrations. Remember I talked to you about make it simple, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's absolutely critical. And sometimes these concepts can be a little bit complicated, especially when I was interviewing Jeffrey Moore. If you've ever read Crossing the Chasm, it can be a little bit complicated, but we sort of simplified it, and we did nice charts and graphs. I did a really nice chart of his technology adoption, not a chart, sorry, a graphic, an illustration of his technology adoption curve, for instance, and you can really see it visually. So if there's one book to pick up, this would be the one. Even if you have the Audible, you might want to use it as a reference. Okay, well, I'm looking at selling my company. Okay, well, I'm looking at scaling. Okay, I'm looking at starting a new company. Okay, so there's it's a collection of dozens and dozens of stories. We interviewed over 200 people, 50 in the book. One of my favorite chapters is the one on Joe Foster, who founded Reebok, who in 1979 took his business from $9 million to $900 million in 4 years. In 4 years. And by the way, he found his X factor. It was aerobics. And Jane Fonda wore his shoes on national television. He got reviews from Runner's World. What's old again is new again. Reviews, influencers. I did ask him, by the way, did you pay Jane Fonda to wear those shoes? And he said, no, she paid for her own shoes.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. We're going to include a link to your book. And do you want us to include a link to your website as well? Which websites do you want us to link to?
Startup Club, really Startup Club. And we announce speakers on Startup Club every week who's coming out. And we have 7 or 8 speakers lined up, phenomenal authors, experts, serial entrepreneurs. And if you want to know who they are, just sign up to that email list on startup.club.
Perfect. We'll do that. It's such a pleasure to work with you, and I hope to have you back. So thank you very much for all your insights, and looking forward to one more conversation, or hopefully a series of. Let me just talk to you about that offline. You're just a wealth of knowledge, and I think our community would really love having someone like you in our corner. So thank you for everything, and I also want to take a minute to thank our listeners. Till we meet again, have a wonderful rest of the week.
Yeah, thank you.